Well, I think we should start today by thanking people who've been going on this journey with us.
Totally. It's just been so fun, man. Like experiencing people following along, messaging you and I, and hearing from people that are reading as a family, which is really fun. People doing it with friends. My grandma's been following along, Kath. I think I told you that
amazing.
Kath.
Yeah.
Yeah. She specifically emailed, which is really impressive. That she's even on the email, and she's been enjoying it. I think my mom's been sent. I don't think she's on Instagram.
Okay.
So I don't know if she's seen the YouTube videos.
She's not posting. Watching. What about TikTok? Is she following you on TikTok yet?
You know, that's probably the spot, because I think she likes the funny dance videos on there. But dude, this has been an amazing journey, because for me, just spending, this is day 16, we're over halfway there, and spending 16 days in a row in one book like Mark, and I'm making new connections in this book that I never have before. Like, this has been a real learning journey for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, me too. Just taking almost like just a focused look at Jesus. I've always found when I read the Gospels that I'm like, oh, this is why I love even spreading out the Gospels. Like sometimes reading plans, if you just start in the beginning of the New Testament, you go Jesus for half the New Testament, and then the rest of it is about Jesus, but it's not these stories and encounters and so personal. So I just love the how personal it is. And
how long have you been reading the Bible for? Like, as like a follower of Jesus and pretty regular, how long have you been doing that?
I think intentionally I really started. I had a bunch of stops and starts when I was younger, when I was a teenager, and even before that. But mostly after I was 17 years old is when I started. When I just had graduated high school, and I started reading the Bible, like for myself and like regularly.
So that's a long 20 years?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a lot, 20 plus years. I mean, if we want to get into specifics, which I'm proud to do, I'm very proud of how many years I've lived, you know.
I guess I think I started reading the Bible more regularly when I was 16, so about 16 years. But I think I imagine that I would understand it more by now. Like, even as we're discussing some of today's text, like read chapter 8, about like the yeast of the Pharisees and his conversations with his disciples and stuff like that. There's stuff I'm still asking, like, what's he trying to say there about this? But then on the same side, I'm really encouraged the more that it's ever been fitting together. And it's like probably reading Mark like dozens and dozens of time over the last 16 years. I feel like each time it's done something in my heart. But then even now, I'm still on this journey of like, I bet the next pass I'll see more and more. So I found that really encouraging. I hope for people that maybe it's the first time through the book of Mark, and it's like you're beginning a journey. And every time you revisit this book, there's going to be more there for you, deeper understanding, and not to be discouraged if you feel like, oh, I'm still not getting this. That's okay. We're on that same journey with you.
Yeah, love it. And the more you start reading, you start making all those connections, and the connections are actually, I often think of the biggest moments in my life have been those connect the dots moments, where it's maybe I've been listening to a teaching, I've been reading the Bible or reading a book or something, and all of a sudden the dots connect, and you go, oh my goodness, you see the picture coming together a little bit more clearly.
Well, I think that's a good setup for today, because we want to do this story called the healing of the blind man at Bethsaida, which is verse 22 to 26. And it's a really cool story. And if you want to pause, you can read it. But essentially, Jesus meets a blind man. He even like spits and like on his eyes, and that's how he's healed. But then like after he prays for him once, he needs to be prayed for a second time. So it says this in verse 24, after Jesus prays for him the first time, it says, he looked up and said, I see people. They look like trees walking around, which is like, he's like, I kind of see better, but they're fuzzy. Like it's not sharp. It's not 20/20 vision. So it says, once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. So this story is about Jesus healing a man and him seeing clearly. And in the past, I wouldn't have made this connection, but I think we're really meant to see where Mark is positioning this story, because right after that is this whole conversation between Jesus and his disciples, where Jesus in verse 27 goes with his disciples. And it says that he asked them, who do people say that I am? And then Peter's final answer in verse 29 is, you are the Christ. And so what we see here, right after a story of Jesus helping a man see the world clearly, like giving a man sight, is a story about Peter and the disciples beginning to really see Jesus more clearly. And I think that we're meant to see those side by side.
Yeah, and that idea of sight and then almost like spiritual sight of seeing,
or insight.
Yeah. Oh, hey, I like it. Yeah. Sight and insight they're right there beside each other. And it's encouraging because it is that kind of like that blind man, when he was healed, it was like he could see a little bit, people look like trees walking around. And then it was like, and then there was another step of the healing. And it was like, then he could see fully.
Yeah. And do you remember those t-shirts that say like, Jesus is my homeboy? Do you remember those?
Yeah.
They're really silly. Probably most people watching this don't know that reference. But when I was like in high school, people wore these t-shirts that were like, Jesus is my homeboy. And that was really interesting because I guess Christians would wear them. Jesus is my homeboy. That's fine. But then people that weren't followers of Jesus that wouldn't think. So this moment, the reason why I bring that up is because this moment is kind of like, who do you say that Jesus is? Is he your homeboy? So he says, who do people say that I am? And then they reply in verse 20, well, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, which is another way to say like important prophet. Now, prophets in the day of Jesus were like important figures. So it's like, it'd almost be like he's an awesome celebrity or like he's an important religious figure. Yes. But then he goes, but who do you say that I am? Like, is he like, there's a lot of public opinion about who Jesus is, but who do you say that I am? And then that's when Peter responds like, well, you're the Christ. And this is a bold statement that you're the one that God has sent to bring deliverance and restoration and healing to the world, to really bring a new era of God's goodness on planet Earth.
I wonder if Peter felt fully confident and excited to say it, or I wonder if there was a bit of like, I'm almost like I'm pretty sure this is who he is, and I'm gonna just have this almost nervous courage to say you're the Christ, right? In my translation it says Messiah, like you're the one, you're the promised deliverer, you're the one we've been waiting for. Like, I wonder if there's that nervousness even in confessing it.
I think there's something important in the experience of journeying with Jesus, of confession, of, like I remember even recently in some difficult times saying, God, I know you're good, like declaring who God is. And that there's a role in the Christian journey of just declaring, like, even if there's different opinions out there about who God is, even if there's different circumstances, I'm declaring that you're good. But I think there's something else going on here, because for the story before, the guy saw in part, like he revealed more. Like the first time he's prayed for, he's seen like trees, but then he's prayed for a second time and he sees even more clearly. And I'm not sure actually where Mark is placing Peter and the disciples in that narrative of like not seeing to seeing in part to seeing clearly. But I think Mark's putting them in the middle.
I as you were saying that, I was like, oh yeah, it's probably in the middle because of the rest of chapter 8, which we'll get to tomorrow. Right. But that he's starting to see him clearly, but not
because Jesus is the teacher, teaching them who he is and what his kingdom is like. And he's kind of like, even before, if you look, he's frustrated. You guys aren't getting it. You aren't getting it. And then there's this moment, Peter gets it. But then what we're going to see for the rest of the book, he still doesn't fully get it. And that's both encouraging and discouraging. It's encouraging because we're all invited. Or let me say it's discouraging because you're like, like, shouldn't he have got it by now? And we all feel that way sometimes, like, I still don't feel like I get it. I don't get Jesus and his ways. But it's also encouraging because Jesus says, hey, you can be on this journey with me. Even his own disciples who walk with him. It was a journey of understanding more. And you'll see Peter especially, how often he's like just still not getting it. And Jesus is so patient with him and constantly revealing himself to him.
And I think that's our prayer for ourselves. And that's our prayer. Again, thank you for following along. That's our prayer for you, that you would see God more clearly as we continue to just look at the person of Jesus day after day after day.
Yeah, I love that. Well, can't wait to pick it up tomorrow.
Sweet.
See ya.